Let's talk about the health of the hemp industry as a whole. I've seen some articles that you've shared on LinkedIn talking about, is the hemp industry dead? Because we had this massive oversupply in 2019 and then a slump in 2020, 2021. So is that just on the CBD side? Is the what you are using on your side that's completely different? You haven't seen as much of an up and down?
Well, so our area in Western Kentucky had 19 processors in business in 2018 and 2019. And that's when we were setting up there. Now there are two.
Wow.
So, yep. Um, it's pretty scary when you see everybody that are in maybe not the same product, but if you consider the hemp industry to be an industry, the same general industry, if you've got like 80, 90% of them that have gone out of business, that's a big problem. It was mainly CBD. CBD promised unrealistic returns. And in promising unrealistic returns, then there were unrealistic expectations that were not met, and everybody stopped doing it. So, CBD, although it is able to be done on a small scale, you don't need to grow 3, 4, 500,000 acres of floral material. They grew 5 years of stock in 1 year.
Oh, wow.
And then that nobody grew it in 2020, 2021. A lot of that 2019 stuff is being absorbed into the market.
Still,
Um,
2 years later, that's they're still using that supply.
when we set up our flooring mill in an old tobacco co-op building, so like a tobacco warehouse in Murray, Kentucky, downtown, it had 800,000 pounds in the building we were in.
Whoa.
Yeah. And there was allegedly 2 million pounds were in there in 2019 in these three buildings. When we got in, there was 800,000 left. It's been sold and moved out since. But we actually got the building because one of our growers had a bunch of CBD in there. And he said, hey, as we're starting to sell this stuff, it's starting to open up. And I said, yeah, I only need 5,000 square feet, one straight line, and I can set up a processing line. So when he sold that stuff in the springtime, we set up a flooring line in a quarter of this building. And the building next to it was still full, and the one up above it used to have some in it. And so as they were selling it, then we're building out and growing our manufacturing facility inside of that building. Now it's all gone, and we just got that coating line that's coming in to fill out the rest of the building.
That's
So,
exciting.
so yeah, the hemp industry is crazy. Um, there is a use in many different categories for this plant. I always have to tell everybody, I do not believe it's going to save the world. I do believe it makes a difference in multiple categories. If you think realistically, it'll be a single digit percentage in many different categories. So in the agricultural side, I don't believe that hemp is going to be, I don't think it'll ever be 10% of the actual agricultural annual growth or crop planted in the United States. But if it's 1%, 3%, 5%, I wouldn't be surprised. As far as in the flooring industry, like we're doing, it will always be a single digit percentage of the hardwood industry. The closer I get to 8 or 9%, the better we're doing. The more I stick in that 1%, the more hardships I'll have because we can't get the economies of scale. Lumber, similar scenario. It's going to be the same, I think, for like Tommy and the boys at Hempatecture with getting into insulation. It's never going to dominate the insulation industry. But if we do our job right, we can replace the, say, 5% of the dirtiest insulation or the nastiest flooring with 5% of the cleanest, most sustainable. And that actually does move the needle a little bit.
Yeah, there are two things.
And
Like you talk about, it's still 5% of a multi-million dollar industry. So it's still significant, even though it's just 5%. That's what you said during our last call. And then on the other side, you can still make a difference, even though you're just 5%. You can all the other big players in the industry can wake up and start to clean up their act because you have ended the industry and people are talking about you and they want something cleaner.
Absolutely. And the customer is the one who makes the call, whether it's to me or whether it's to a big company like Shaw or Mohawk. When a customer says, I don't want formaldehyde in my flooring anymore, or I don't want you cutting down a tropical hardwood, then all of a sudden they look around and say, okay, the market has spoken. And so we're not going to cut down 500-year-old old growth rainforest, or we're not going to use formaldehyde inside of our plywood or inside of our engineered woods because our customer base doesn't want that. And so the more the market goes out there, and your listeners, and I love doing these shows just because the market speaks. And if I can say to somebody, hey, there's a cancer rate in the United States that is still way higher than it should be if you are using natural materials. What is the cause of that? That's a very complicated conversation. But plastics and petroleum-based adhesives are a significant portion of that. And the building industry has a responsibility to make sure you're not putting things inside of people's homes, like
Especially
lead paint.
considering the amount of time we spent in our homes and basically all our lives.
Exactly. And people are closing the doors more. And there's actually studies from Harvard that show that people at work are 6.3 to 8% more productive when they have healthy materials without VOCs in their home. Proper ventilation, clean building materials inside of their office when they're working from home, or inside of your office where you're working in an office. There's also studies that are out there, and this is not through Harvard, but through different places that say that attractive, sustainable materials that are associated with a brand, especially in retail, cause double-digit increases in your sales over just having like a plastic shelf. If you have a sustainable hempwood shelf, for example, or there's a lot of things like this that just having the cheapest thing that's made on the other side of the world with a chemical you don't quite know what it is, it makes a difference, especially around children. While you're still developing your lungs, people are getting asthma because there's dirty building materials in the house as a kid. And then that sticks with them forever. And I have problems like that from working around formaldehyde. And so I've kind of made it a mission to not have that be a problem for others, at least give the choice.